Hey, what's up, everybody? Hope you're having a fantastic weekend. What better way than to kick it off with this week's meta snapshot? We're a week into the balance update, the first balance update we've had in this game. We've also had a few major tournaments being played, and in addition to that, we've got the Rage Pro League as well underway. So we're already starting to learn a few lessons about what the meta is looking like and how some of the decks are shaping up. So with that said, we're going to dive in. I'm going to do things a little bit differently today. I'm actually going to share with you where I think the meta is right now, and I'm going to really just focus on the tier 1, 2, and some of the new decks, and that's kind of going to be the focus of today. So if you'd like that, hit that thumbs up, and let's crack on with it, shall we? All right, so this is how I kind of see the meta at the minute, guys. I think that the tier 1 is still pretty stable, to be honest. Crest Haven is just a fierce all-round deck that can basically hold its own and against pretty much everything, and that and Spellboost have been top of the meta now for some time, so not too many changes there really. It doesn't mean the other decks can't win against them and can't do well. They certainly can, but I definitely think that those decks, there's no doubt about it that they're in the tier 1 space. Now last week I put Loot Sword and Modab Abyss as 1.5, and I've kind of like just scrapped that and just said, look, they're in tier 1. We've seen Modab Abyss now win numerous tournaments, and it's like the strongest fair deck is one of the ways I put it. Like, it actually plays the game. To be honest, it's quite a high skill deck in that sense as well. I feel like you've got to, like, in order to kind of get that edge, get that extra few percent, you've got to play it really well. And Loot Sword, you know, obviously has kind of transformed the way that Swordcraft plays. Last season, last patch, or set 1 and 2 is a better way of saying it. It was very a board heavy deck, and now we're leading into this loot and storm kind of idea with lots and lots of burst damage. So those 4 are real powerhouses, and I think they're pretty much safely in tier 1. I'm going to look at some decks in a minute, but let's just talk through tier 2. I think in tier 2, we've got mid-range Abyss, which just before the balance patch was really starting to prove itself, and has continued to see a lot of dominant high win streaks at the top of the ladder. I think Combo Roach still has to be in here, just because even though it's the deck that's hard for most people to play, it's just really, really good. It's really good into the... It's still really, really good into those top 2 decks. It still can beat Spellboost, it still can beat Crest Haven, and it just makes it such a good tournament pick if you can play it pretty flawlessly. Now, obviously, the exciting stuff comes this week with Puppet Portal shooting up the ranks, and I do definitely feel that it does solidly deserve a tier 2 spot. We're going to talk more when we show you the deck list, but the ability to control the board very early, to get chip damage, and to have massive burst damage now with Orcus and the new Puppet Cat combo, which just means that Orcus goes from guaranteeing doing 8 damage to, you know, somewhere between 12 or more damage in one turn, which is pretty it's pretty devastating for a lot of decks, to be honest. And similarly, we got Storm Dragon. Now, Dragon is in a really interesting spot. We saw a buff, obviously, to the ramp features in the deck, and so a lot of people have been trying different versions. And I'm going to share with you like 3 or 4 different versions of Dragon, so you can see where it is. It hasn't completely settled, but what I feel is kind of clear is that in terms of the consistent top performers, I feel like the Storm versions, the players who are rushing to the top of the Dragon ranks, seem to be favouring the Storm version slightly. So I'm putting the Storm version in tier 2, but I've got several other Dragon decks that I feel might well be in tier 2 as well. It's kind of like a maybe, and so I think Disdain Ramp, Fenny Ramp, and Miracle Dragon, they all fall in that kind of, they're probably in that tier 2.5. They might actually be tier 2. We just need a little bit more time to play and to refine the decks and to see where things settle in the meta. And the other ones that fall into that category, I think, are the Hybrid Haven deck that was championed by Toby, who, you know, I keep leaning on because in my opinion, I feel like Toby's becoming one of the most interesting deck builders in this game at the minute. And his Hybrid Haven deck is really good. It also introduces a lot more ward than the Crest Haven, and therefore does very well into Combo Roach, and it even does pretty well into Puppet because of it and stuff. So I think this deck could low-key be pretty powerful right now. And then, of course, Tempo Fairy as well, which is was kind of in the tier 2 slot, and I'm not sure if it's been knocked or bumped with the shake up from the balance patch, but I definitely feel that deck is still very, very powerful when played well. So the tier 3 and 4 you can see there. I'm not going to go through them. Kind of speak for themselves. If you've been following along with these videos every week, you'll know that I've talked about them and shown deck lists for them. Not too much change there. But I really want to focus on the tier 1, tier 2, and 2.5 decks. So let's jump into that. Okay, so let's start off with Crest Haven. So you really want to be looking for your Marwyn early, getting the crest in play. You want your permanent crests in play, your Grimnirs, potentially your Wilbert. Yeah, and then your happy days, right? It's gonna be very easy to put some of your temporary crests in place and then hit Maddening Benison to get your heal. You've got removal for days with the AoE. The big change this week is really just the reintroduction of Selefa. I think that with things like Puppet coming into play now, Selefa is pretty helpful on just dealing with those wide early boards, particularly where, like on for example turn 5, if they, I don't know, the Evo Zvi or something, then your Blinding Faith will clear the rest of the stuff, but it won't kill the Zvi, but the Selefa would do. So I feel like I'm starting to see a few lists that are bringing Selefa into the fold just to have that early AoE. Plus it's another ward, plus it's more heal. So, you know, it fits in pretty well with the deck. You're only putting one copy in, so you're not disrupting the whole kind of like needing to find your crests and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, it's just a very, very powerful deck right now. Next up, we've got the Spellboost Rune. I'm sure you're all falling asleep at this point. We've seen this deck for days now. I mean, this version has reintroduced a single copy of William, which is kind of interesting. You know, it deals well with these some of the Abyss boards. You think about these wide boards from Congrant and the is it Raoul, that, you know, going wide with the 3/5/5s and stuff like that. Like, William can just deal nicely with those boards, you know, a single copy of the Edelweiss. But other than that, it's pretty much standard stuff as per usual. Looking for that big dimension climb on turn 10, controlling the mid game with Anangria, Burgeon, and Norman for the heal. Yeah, and obviously declimb shenanigans go off when you can do Ruler Cocytus into declimb, and or you can do the Q-on into declimb giant Q-on. I think you all know by now. What I'm going to try to do, guys, if I can remember, is to put links to some of the deck guides, by the way, because if we go on to the next one, which is Modab Abyss, I have done a full deck guide for this, so I'll try and remember to put the links. Maybe just look at the top of the screen and see if it's there. If you want to see a fuller explanation with gameplay, go and check out the deck guides. But this deck is a really good deck. It's very, very, very solid, and I really enjoy this. It's one of my more enjoyable ones at the minute. From early game, trying to get Castle and Entwining, you know, you're basically able to activate mode twice from this card. Why is that important? Well, because you want to Sham Nature as early as possible, and therefore, obviously, that means that you want to be getting as many mode triggers, if you like, as possible. So Castle of Entwine is really good early. Obviously, if you're dealing with go wide boards, you want to be looking for the Devotee. If you need sort of the Supplicant, this is one of my favorite cards. I really love the flexibility of this card. It's just perfect on 4 as well, right? A Fanfare that deals 3, it will always kill something that came before it, and then it's a nice 4/4 body. It's like a perfect tempo card. I really, really love it. And then, of course, once you get into Crazy Town, once Shamnacha goes off, we can do some silly things like playing Congruent with a Super Evo, where it can basically choose 2 of these 3 modes, and then you Super Evo and you repeat that. So in other words, you're choosing 4 lots of the modes. You can build ridiculous boards. You can do things like Jinsetsu and Yuzuki Twins, where you basically summon 4 copies and destroy the enemy board and heal all for 1. It's just phenomenal in the late game. So yeah, really focus on that Sham Nature as early as you can. Another nice, interesting combo is obviously playing out the Leah early. You can use that for a target for Reaper's Death Slash, or you can use Reaper's Death Slash on a Super Evo target. But then you can use Chaos Cyclone to kind of bring Leah back. You can also use the Castle if you played that down. Next, you can use that to buff Leah. So if they don't take Leah out, you could use that to buff Leah, giving her one attack, so she can actually attack. That can sometimes catch people out in the early game. Yeah, really, really good deck. Screaming of Loathing helps you cycle, obviously. It's kind of got everything really. It's very good. It does struggle a little bit still with things like Rune and Crest, and you probably have to try and almost play a little bit more tempo-y against those. But overall, I think it's a good all-comers deck. Next up, we got Loot Saw. Now, there are a few different ways you can build this. Most of the top decks, you see they either favor a build around using a tablet or not using a tablet. So, for example, if they're not using a tablet, you might see something like 2 copies of Ravening Tentacles at the end game. But if you're using like 1 tablet, where you're going to reduce the deck down to 1 of everything, then playing something like a single Ravening and a single Centaur Champion means you still get 2 cards that give you that reach damage, where otherwise you would obviously lose 1 copy of that if you played the tablet. So when you play the tablet, it does change how you build the deck a tiny bit. And I want to share this version. I think it's really good, and it went on a huge win streak. And also Kagemitsu being brought back into the fold, just giving you that kind of relentlessness and always a threat of Super Evo in it, obviously for a cheeky sort of 5 damage out of nowhere to face. And yeah, usual shenanigans, right? Octrace can help you with the Crest. I really like the Crest, right? Getting that Remnant of Hollow, so you're doing 4 damage for 1 in the late game. Combining that with after a Sincero and then into this Albert, Odin, Ravening Tentacle Centurion, it's just so much relentless burst damage. And of course, in the early game, you try to control the board. People are starting to drop Luminous Lance Trooper. It's actually a fantastic and amazing value card, but it's actually not that great in this deck. I mean, there are some cool things you can do with it, obviously, like particularly if you can play it with Zirconia, for example, because then Zirconia's little knights that come out can actually attack. But if you actually look through this build, there aren't as many opportunities to combo the ability of the Luminous Lance Trooper. So I've seen some lists where they only run 1 copy of it, but this version's got 2. I think it's got a nice mix of early game and removal, with obviously that super powerful mid game with the Zirconia and Congruent of Usurpation, just taking anything out. The only thing is with this deck is I feel like sometimes, like if you don't draw Sincero or Zirconia, the game plan can fall apart a little bit. So I think you have got to mulligan a bit carefully and make sure that you've got at least 1 of these in play. And equally, I tried to look for 1 returning slash or Sincero, just so that when you play like Congruent, for example, you've got something to kind of fuse. So there's a few things to think about there, but overall, I think this deck is still very, very powerful. And again, if you want to go and check out the deck guide for that, I hopefully have included the link. And similarly, we've got the Mid-Range Abyss. Just very recently did a deck guide on this, so if you want to go and check out the full description of it. Basically, what this does is it doesn't engage with the whole messing about that Mode does. You know, Mode has a very powerful late game if you Shamnacha, whereas this deck says, do you know what, I just want to end the game before we even get to that stage of the game. How about that? So we've got more Storm in there, you know, whether it's the Devious Mummies. I've even seen a single copy of Dogged one being run. If you wanted to drop a set of the Twins, you could put a single Dogged one in there. I don't love that card. I mean, it's great when it goes off, but I think the odds of you having it and relying on your opponent's Super Evo in, I just don't like the Iron Genius of it. But I've lost to that, so, you know, I'm not going to say it's bad. But this deck just focuses on tempo. It's one of the more straightforward game plans in the top decks, and so particularly if you're like a fairly new player, if you're coming from another card game, I'd probably recommend this right now. I think it's really powerful, but kind of easy to get your head around. Basically, play your stuff out on tempo, try to dominate the board, get chip damage. There's a few things that stick really well, like the Ghastly Soare gives you sticky units, Undead Soul just gives you sticky units, and then obviously you've got some big bombs in the late game with your Cerebrus, and obviously Rulnai can go Storm for face damage, Odin can go Storm for face damage. So yeah, really, really cool. And you want to use your Evos early and really put the pressure on your opponent. So Combo Roach, again, I'm not going to spend too much time on this, guys. You've seen this deck. You use your early cards to control. You use Glades to kind of reset the board in the mid-game and draw. You're looking to get Godwood Staff down early, so every time you combo 3, you draw. The Lambert Cairn gives you a 0-cost spell. 0 cost is very important because you can play a card, which is 1 for your combo for Killer Roach. And then you go off on a ginormous Killer Roach, bounce it with staff and hit face. Again, I've got guides on this if you have been under a rock for the last 2 months and somehow not seen this deck, but most of you have, so I'm going to skip on. Next up, we have got the brand new puppets. All right, now we're talking. So there's a few versions of the puppets. This is a version that I took from the Rage Pro League this weekend, so definitely worth checking out. Obviously, the Puppet Cat is making a huge difference to the amount of burst that we can do. You can just play this out on 1 for tempo, and often that helps you get some extra chip damage anyway, so it's kind of like the same thing as instead of giving you the damage later, it's giving it you early, helping you control the board. It's also a rush unit, so it's nice to help just, you know, if you just need 1 damage, just to sometimes you do, you just need 1 damage to, you know, control the board, or like say you're playing your opponent's Svi, and you need to kill Victoria, who's got 1 health. Sometimes you just use your Puppet Cat if you don't have a normal puppet to do that. So it's a very flexible card, actually, in this deck, and it's very good. We are very good at controlling the early game with this deck. And what I also love is bringing in the 3 copies of Ruby. Obviously, Ruby can put a card from your hand back to your deck and draw a card. Why does that matter? Because this deck massively depends on your ability to draw Orcus. And so that means you need to mulligan pretty hard for Orcus, to be honest. And you also want to make use of Ruby to correct poor hands so that you have more chance of drawing into Orcus. Everything else mid-game's pretty standard. Zvi is actually much improved now. And obviously medical grade assassin helps you get through walls. Yudi's a nice early body that also draws and cycles through your deck. Noah makes your either compete in the game while you're looking for Orcus, or it buffs your existing puppets so that when Orcus comes down, he's got even more stuff to hit face with or remove the board with. It's just a really powerful deck. What I see as well is sometimes people with the coin on turn 8 actually coining out Liam, playing Liam first, Evo in, and then on turn 9 they can actually play Orcus with the Puppet Cat, right? Because you've now got that 9, yeah. It's just devastating. If you get double Orcus as well, back to back, it's just devastating. One thing I like about this particular version, which is something that I'd not seen until this weekend's Rage, is actually having a single copy of Olivia. So the 7-drop spot is a little bit of a bridge, and obviously we have the Odin to get us there. But it's only 1 card, so I like having that extra 7-drop, and Odin actually makes a lot of sense because, well, it heals, so it keeps you in the game, but it draws through, right? So it's actually going to dig for last chance to dig for that Orcus before turn 8. And in addition to that, it's obviously giving you, potentially Storm to a unit that's already down, so that you can get a little bit of extra damage into face. Yeah, it's pretty good. It's pretty good. You can even, on turn 7? On turn 8, you can do combos like playing Olivia with Gilnelise, which is also pretty good. It's a cheeky way of getting even more heal. A turn 8 Olivia Gilnelise gets quite a bit of heal without obviously using the Super Evo on Olivia, but you're not having to then do it solely on a Gilnelise. So it's kind of interesting. It's a more threatening board, more different way of getting heal. So yeah, that is one version of the puppets. Some people are running the 2-drop. Some people are running a single copy of Jerry to give an alternative win con for when you don't draw the Orcuses. I've seen a single copy of Cocytus. But as I say, this is taken from the Rage Pro League, and I think this is a pretty good deck to be going on with. So next up, we have got the Storm Dragon. Now, as I say, Dragon is probably the class that's in the most interesting place at the minute because there's quite a few different ways of going, and I don't think we're really established yet what is the absolute best way. Although I do think that Storm Dragon, maybe it's just because it's easier to play, does seem to be, it's probably just slightly higher on either the consistency or the power level at the minute. Why? Because similar to what we said about some of the other top decks, what you can do with this deck is you can, you can ramp quicker into your late game units, obviously, and the new change to Liu Fang, it really helps with that. But what you're able to do is from turn 5, if you need to control the board, you've got Season's Merman, but you've got things like Galmeo, Forte, Odin, Galmeo at 7 for Storm. You've got Gayu for Super Evo to just dominate the board. If you need heal, you've kind of got that built in with the Neptunes and the Mermans and the Megalorcas. So it's kind of got a little bit of a flex strategy if it needs to delay the game a little bit. But it's got those Storm units that if you're hitting the kind of mid-game, you just put pressure on the enemy face, and then they're having to remove your board, and they're having to deal with trying to heal. And if they don't, you're just going to come through, because in the late game, you've got things like the Warrior of the Deep, which is great because we do run a tablet. So when we make one copy of everything, then obviously having a single copy of something that can just deal 6 damage to face, it's like better tentacles in that sense, right, from swords. So this card is very good in this type of deck, and even got 2 copies of the Genesis Dragon Reborn. So we've seen people posting some really impressive win streaks on this, and also getting to the top of the Dragon class rankings with this type of build. So yeah, if you want a fast and furious, relentless kind of dragon deck, this is the way to go. And again, I did have a guide up on my channel actually, which went heavily into the kind of like Storm approach. So check that one out. Now, Tempo Fairy's been around for a couple of months. We did see the big addition last month where Jerry went in there, giving that alternative win con for when it runs out of steam. Amitas coming back into play. This deck is very, very powerful because the tempo is incredible. If the tempo is as good as anything in the game, I think, actually. In the early game, if you get the right cards going off, you know, if you can get an Amitas on 3 when you had 2 fairies in hand, it's really brutal. Sometimes that can just win you the game outright. And then following up with you know, Cynthia's, and then using like mini Roach combos just to do like, you know, somewhere between 6 and 8 damage. It can, because of all the chip damage you've done, that can win you the game in its own right. And then obviously you've got Odin to finish. But what we can do is, having done all of that, we can obviously pivot into Jerry, and particularly against decks that you know, potentially heal from that chip damage. Then we've got the Jerry Bane alternative win con. So really good deck. You're got to decide that you've got to understand the matchup, and you've got to understand like when to Jerry. Like, are you going to be able to take them out with your tempo game plan? And if you think you can and you've got the cards, then go for it. But if you don't think you can, or you don't have the right cards and you've got that Jerry, you just switch and you go into the Jerry game plan. Again, I've seen some massive win streaks this week being posted with this deck, this particular version. So that's how I know this is very, very viable in the current meta. Now then, let's talk about some of the interesting dragon shenanigans that are going on. So first of all, you've got the Fenny dragon build. So this particular version actually got to rank 1 on the dragon class rankings. So I've not played this particular version a ton either, but it did get to rank 1. It's kind of interesting, right? Because you've got the usual stuff in the early game. It has got slightly fewer pure Dragoncraft followers. And the reason I say that's important is because for us, just Flame basically draws you a Dragoncraft follower, right? So Olivia's not that. Cocytus is not that. So, you know, it just means that the stuff that you're getting is stuff that either heals, or it's a Fenny, or it's removal, you know, like really good removal. So I don't know if that's playing a part in it, but obviously once you Fenny, you've got Olivia, which can cycle through, because Olivia is now cheaper, and then you cycle through and you find your cheap cards. You've got Golden Melody, which cycles, and you've obviously got Cocytus as an end game, which you can pivot into to kind of finish your opponent off. The other thing you'd be able to do as well is if you draw things like cheaper Fenny, sometimes you can even Cocytus and then Fenny and make your hand cheaper. That's just absolutely disgusting. And obviously things like Tablet allow you to draw into these win cons very, very quickly. So yeah, that actually is an interesting deck. If you like Fenny and you like kind of you know, discounting your deck, going longer, then this deck looks pretty good. Equally, you've also got the Contempt Dragon or Disdain Dragon type of build. And again, this has been people have had some good success. They've climbed high in the Grandmaster rankings, and there's been some pretty good win streaks recorded with this as well. So, I mean, again, I don't know. I can't really say to you that it's better than the other one or it's not better than the other one, but it's a slightly different approach, right? Why is this different? Well, we are making more use of Galmeo's Crest. And we have things like Zufrift in here. We're not playing the Cocytus. We have got the Fortes and the Odins. So we kind of like it's a bit more similar to the Storm version, but it's got this kind of like a bit more top end in there, right? It's got these big sort of bombs that the other version doesn't have. It's kind of similar. And then the one that I think is absolutely fascinating, and again, go and check out my guide for this on that I recently did this week on the channel. I had some absolutely amazing games in that guide, so definitely check this one out, because the games really show off the different win cons. There are like 5 win cons with this deck, and again, shout out to Toby. He built this deck, and my God, the guy is just he's a deck building genius. He comes out with some really interesting decks. Now, with this deck in particular, as I talk about in the guide, it's got like 4 or 5 different win cons. Ultimately, the kind of OTK or the miracle that goes off is when you get discounted. You've got the Fenny in there. And by the way, again, we've only got Fenny, White Scale Herald, and Liu Fang that is a Dragoncraft follower. That's it. There's 3. So think about how good Ferocious Flame is in terms of drawing those. And then obviously you can play Fenny, and then you get discounted Cocytuses and Jerrys. You've also got the Draconic Strike to discount them. And that basically means you can play Jerry in one turn and immediately play Cocytus afterwards, so that you discard your hand and draw 6 cards each turn. And obviously you've only got 10 cards once you've put Cocytus in there. And sometimes if you've discounted it well enough, you can even play things like a Golden Note Melody or a Greatness Ascended, because remember, this only costs 1 once there's only 1 thing in your deck. And you just win instantly, right? So you play Jerry, Cocytus, Greatness Ascend, GG, instantly. But there are other win cons. You can just get a cheaper Cocytus, for example. You can get this thing down to 8 from like a Draconic Strike and play a nice early Cocytus out, and that wins you games. You can obviously pivot into a straight-out Jerry deck game. You can play that really early. Sometimes we do that against like Abysscraft, for example. That seems to be the preferred win con there. You've also even got things like discounting Jerry, and then Jerry, and then doing something like on turn 10 playing Jerry into Fenny, so you get the Jerry deck, but you discount the entire Jerry deck by making it all half price with Fenny, which is just absolutely insane. So yeah, there's just so many different ways of winning with the deck. It's really phenomenal. The key thing is being able to get there. There's a lot of like storm decks that can just beat this deck down basically and win. So it does struggle a little bit if you're coming up against lots of aggro, to be honest. But if not, it's a really, really fun and interesting way to play the game. So check out my deck guide on that, and shout out to Toby once again. And whilst we're talking about Toby, the final deck that I think is in that kind of might be tier 2, putting it in the tier 2.5, was Toby's Hybrid Haven deck, which he built towards the end, just before the patch. But in a way, it might have actually got better since the patch because of the extra wards that you get in this deck. That are in Crest, and it might actually help against things like Portal and a lot of the Storm Burst decks. So this deck's just like, it's just full of intricacies as well. I mean, that's why I'm saying I think his deck building is just phenomenal. What we are doing obviously here is we've got things like the Wilbur and Aether combination. And so Aether is going to pull out things like the... well, we've got quite a lot that are in the 2/3 drops. It's obviously things like Grimner and Supplicant of the Rose are the kind of vanguards, but it could also pull out Gilnelis. It could pull out the new Knight of the Holy Order, which is pretty cool because the Wilbert crest means that this thing it says whenever this follower is given plus attack or defense on the field, which it automatically gets from the Wilbert crest, restore 1 defense to your leader. So it starts to give you like heal this thing if they don't take it out, particularly if it's hidden. If it's on board with other more pressing ward units, it might actually survive. So yeah, there's just a lot of kind of cool things. He's got the Jerrybane in here. I don't know that this deck does as well into Crest Haven, but it's got like the Jerrybane alternative Wincon. It's even got a couple of copies of Avian Statue. So it's even got things like a Storm Wincon built in. This is what I mean about the hybrid nature of this and the knowing the different lines of play. So like you'll have these games where you know, you might be sitting there with something that's a relatively harmless looking 0 attack Gilnalese or a, you know, low attack ward or something like that. And you know you get the avian statue down, and then obviously you can play Xian, burst this, and you can suddenly have a bit of burst damage to face as well. So it's just kind of got yeah, it's just kind of got like a really interesting way of. It's a skilled player's deck because it's all about really understanding the matchups, understanding the lines of play, and understanding which win cons, where you need to pivot to kind of edge out the win. So real kind of masterclass of a deck this for sure. So there we go, guys. That is all of the decks, I believe, on this week's Meta Snapshot. Let me know what you think down in the comments. I do want to say that the Miracle Dragon deck is pretty phenomenal, and you can see here that at Isolate 94, I just made it to the finals of the Raise Shadowverse GCS, and you can see he ran standard, I say standard rune. He's actually not so standard. Look, he's got this in there. He's got the 8-drop in there. So he's got that, but also he's playing Toby's Miracle deck. And he actually went 4-1 with this and getting to the final. So even in a competitive level, you know, this is definitely not just a meme deck. And it plays really well into... This deck plays really well into the control decks. So I can see why people are picking it up in a tournament, because it does very well into Rune and potentially Crest Haven as well. So, yeah, I think it's... I think the changes overall... from the balance patch have actually done the game some real good. So... yeah, I don't know. What do you guys think? We're only a week in. Things are going to develop further still, so don't worry about that. But let me know in the comments down below how you're finding the game right now. And if there's any cool decks that you think I've missed, I'd love to hear all about it. That's it for this week, guys. Take it easy. Look after yourselves. Have a great weekend. Get out, touch some grass, enjoy some sun, and enjoy some Shadowverse Worlds Beyond. I'll see you next week.